UFC Fight Night. Max Holloway versus Arnold Allen. Let's get right into it, folks. We have a pretty decent card here. It's a little top heavy, but they actually did spread out some of these cards into some of these better fights into the prelims as well. So this should be a pretty entertaining card. Let's get right into it. I'm going to skip these first three fights because I don't really give a shit about these people quite yet. So let's just go right through it. Lucy Pudilova, I'll pick her. Gaston Bolanos, let's go with him. And Denise Gomez. There you go. Those are your picks. Absolutely zero thought put into those whatsoever. Just whatever names stood out to me right now. But our first entertaining fight of the card, or first fight that I'm really anticipating, is Daniel Zellhuber versus Lando Venata. Daniel Zellhuber is coming off a loss versus Trey Ogden, where he really disappointed. He was kind of hyped up going into that fight, but never really got it going. But a guy who's got a lot of talent. And then Lando Venata is a fighter who's been in the UFC 2-3 in his last 5. More seasoned vet, solid grappling. And in this fight, I'm going to pick Daniel Zellhuber. He's sitting at about minus 125 odds at the time of this filming. So a slight favorite, but nothing too significant. I think I'm just going to go with the talent pick here. Lando Venata's got a lot of experience, but Daniel Zellhuber is more of a highly touted prospect for sure, and I think the UFC wants to prop him up a bit. He's a Mexican fighter. Mexicans are really hot right now. Even though he had that poor performance versus Trey Ogden, I think the talent is very evident. You look at the guy and you see, okay, he's extremely tall for the division. He's going to have a few inches on Venata that I think will benefit him on the feet. And I think as long as he gets his hands going early, I think he should be able to find a finish here or eke out a decision win. I'm anticipating Zellhuber might get taken down and controlled in the first round while Venata is still fresh. We saw Venata do that versus Charles Jourdain, and he had a really hot start in that fight, so I could see this fight going the same. So a potential live betting opportunity for Zellhuber if he's down a round going into round 2. But Daniel Zellhuber is the pick. I think he'll find his rhythm in the second and third, and I think he gets a finish in this one. Next is Gillian Robertson versus Piera Rodriguez. I think it's Rodriguez, not Rodriguez. Say that 5 times fast. I'm going with Gillian Robertson here. Piera's an undefeated fighter. Gillian is certainly not, but Gillian's been fighting with the top women's competition in the UFC for a while now. Even though she is younger, 3 years younger than Piera Rodriguez, she definitely has that UFC experience edge over Piera. I think that undefeated record, if you dive into it, it's the level of opponents Piera was fighting. I just don't think were too great. And Pierre's just likely never fought a grappler on Gillian Robertson's level. So I think Gillian will be able to control her on the ground as long as she can get her on the ground and possibly get a submission finish here. If not, just control her for 3 rounds to a decision victory. So Gillian Robertson is the pick at minus 120. Next is Zach Cummings versus Ed Herman. Zach Cummings is 3-2 in his last 5. Ed Herman is 3-2 in his last 5. Zach Cummings is listed as a middleweight fighter, which I have a hard time believing he made 185 pounds. But evidently he did, according to ESPN. Zach Cummings is a minus 225 favorite here. And I'm going to go with Zach Cummings for my pick. Ed Herman is not the most impressive fighter. Does have a 3-2 record in his past 5 fights, which is commendable. But he's a guy who needs to get submissions to win. And Zach's a guy who's never been subbed. It's really submission or bust for Ed Herman. And I don't see him being able to lock any in against Zach Cummings, as he has never been caught in a position like that before and been subbed. So Zach Cummings is going to be a pick. This should be a really fun fight. Who doesn't like watching two tubby guys get after it? This guy certainly does. So Zach Cummings is the pick. Next, Mateus Nicolau versus Brandon Royval. It's not very often that you get such a high-level fight on a fight night prelim. I think it's pretty cool that they're putting this fight on the prelims. I'd be curious to see what Nicolau and Royval think of it, but I think this will certainly draw more eyes to the prelim fights. People will tune in earlier. Obviously, I'm watching the card beginning to end, but I think some of the less committed UFC fans, this could draw some attention to the prelims, because this really is a massive fight in the flyweight division. Nicolau missed weight yesterday, which, maybe it's a bit concerning. I tend to not count it out too much, especially if it's just a 1 pound miss, which, even if that's significant at flyweight, I don't think that's really evidence of a fighter not being locked in at all. I think Mateus just messed up the weight cut. I mean, a grown man getting down to 125 pounds, not easy, ever. So Mateus is a minus 200 favorite here, and he's the pick. I think he's the much more explosive fighter. Royval certainly has had his fair share of success in the flyweight division, but has had some troubles against the cream of the crop of the division. Nicolau's coming off a huge finish against Matt Schnell, I believe, where he got the finish, and I expect him to get another finish here. I think he's an explosive fighter who's on a huge tear right now, 6-fight win streak. I think he keeps it going against Brandon Royval. Mateus, this is a big prove-it fight for him. This puts him right into the title conversation, and he's right outside of that conversation now. So I'm going to go with Mateus Nicolau in that fight. Next, we're moving on to the main card. Is Billy Algeo, let's see. No, not quite the main card yet. I'm getting ahead of myself. We got Billy Algeo versus TJ Brown. Billy Algeo is a minus 200 favorite here, and is 3-2 in his last 5. TJ Brown, a slight underdog, actually a pretty significant underdog at plus 170, who is also 3-2 in his last 5 fights. I'm going with TJ Brown here, and I'll tell you why. Billy Algeo, I was doing a little digging on the guy. I've watched his fights, but I wanted to learn a little bit more about him, and saw that he trains at his own gym. Big no. Trey Ogden trains at his own gym. He got a loss in his most recent fight, and that kind of soured me to the idea of being a head coach at your own gym and fighting. I think there's a bit of a conflict of interest there, if you will. Billy Algeo, definitely a good fighter, but I think it's that gym curse. If you're fighting at your own gym, I'm usually going to fade you. So I'm going to go with TJ Brown based off of that backwards logic. TJ Brown still is a very adequate fighter in his own right, and his gym was called like West Side Team or something. So I fucked with that. So TJ Brown is the pick. Next is Rafa Garcia versus Clay Guida. Rafa is a major favorite in this, and it's always hard to pick against Clay Guida, but I'm going with Rafa Garcia in this one. I think Clay, obviously one of the most storied careers in UFC history. I think he's really just wants to cement that takedown record that he set in his most previous fight. He does have the most takedowns in UFC history, so I expect him to spam takedowns until he gets one against Rafa, and I think he will be able to catch Rafa throwing a big bomb, getting off balance, and being able to put him on his back. And if he gets him down, that definitely makes things interesting. I don't think he's going to finish Rafa. If anyone's getting a finish in this fight, it's definitely Garcia. Garcia throws big shots, not the cleanest punches always, but He's throwing to take your head off, certainly. So Clay Guida, he doesn't get knocked out too often, for sure. The dude can take a hit, so I think Rafa gets a decision win in this fight. Next is Chris Gutierrez versus Pedro Munoz. Gutierrez on a 5-fight winning streak, including most recently a win over Frankie Edgar. Pedro Munoz has not had as much success in the win column. I think he's 1-4 in his last 5, but he's been fighting the top guys in the division. Sean O'Malley, which was a no contest. Whatever your opinion is on that whole escapade, I really don't think he was ducking Sean, but even if he was, Chris Gutierrez is not. I don't think he's on the level of Sean. So, but Pedro has been in there with the top guys for a while now. Chris Gutierrez, have seen him sort of struggle against some of the lower ranked opponents. He had a fight against Dana that I just rewatched, where he definitely was down around going into the second round, got a spinning back fist KO, which was absolutely ridiculous. So it's hard to take anything negative away from that fight, but I just did notice him sort of getting outworked in round 1 against a guy like Dana, and really not looking the most disciplined on the feet. And so that kind of stuck with me. This is a really tough fight to pick. Gutierrez, definitely absurdly talented. Pedro Munoz, he still has that reputation as being a top guy in the bantamweight division despite all the losses. And I'm just going to go with the underdog here, Munoz. I think this is one that a lot of people are going to look at Munoz's record and think that he stinks. And I just don't think that's the truth in reality. But so Pedro Munoz is going to get the win here. Definitely, I don't think he'll finish Gutierrez, but I think he might be able to dance his way to a victory and sort of point fight here. Next is Cutelaba versus Tanner Boser. Cutelaba 1-4 in his last 5. Tanner Boser 2-3. Line's pretty close, almost a pick'em, slight lean towards Cutelaba. I'm going Tanner Boser here. Cutelaba has burned me way too many times in the past. He is a bit on the younger side, which he's got that going for him. And so every time he fights, I usually talk myself into like, oh, he's only 27, he's only 28, he's going to improve, And it just hasn't really materialized in the cage up to this point. And I think he's had ample opportunities to prove himself, and I just don't necessarily know if he's at that level or will get to that level, quite frankly. So Tanner Boser, he's gotten several KOs. He's got big hands. When you get to the light heavyweight division, anyone can really finish anyone when you get down to it. And I'm just going to go with Tanner Boser here. If it turns into a slugfest, that's definitely benefiting Boser. I think he's got the better chin than Cutelaba, and I see Boser KOing Cutelaba and in all likelihood ending his UFC career, at least for now. I think it'd be hard to keep Cutelaba around after losing 5 of his last 6 fights. But Cutelaba still kind of has that name value to maybe go to another promotion and have some success and make a name for himself. And, you never know, maybe make his way back to the UFC, but I just don't see it happening for him in this fight. So Tanner Boser is the pick. Next is Dustin Jacoby versus Azamat Murzakanov. Murzakanov is the underdog in this fight, despite being an undefeated 12-0 fighter, light heavyweight, hailing from Russia, if you couldn't tell. Dustin Jacoby sitting at -150 about right now. He's 4-1 in his last 5, and his most recent loss was a very close loss to Khalil Roundtree. that I remember thinking Dustin Jacoby won. I thought he eked out the win there. It was definitely a close fight against two of the more skilled kickboxers in the division. Um, and Dustin Jacoby is going to be the pick here. He's a guy with kickboxing experience, fought in K1 for a while, fought Alex Pereira, got finished, unfortunately, but I think that was when he was really young in his fighting career. He's got some of the slickest boxing in the division, and I think this fight could put him back into that top 15, top 10 conversation in a wide open light heavyweight division where, I think there's just so much opportunity in that division, especially with Jamal Hill being champ, Yuri being out. Jamal's definitely a very good fighter and one of the best in the division. That's not what I meant by an open division, but when you start getting to the top, it's really is just so wide open, so many injury concerns, so many question marks with a lot of these guys. So I think a win over Mirzakhanov can put Jacoby right back into the mix there at 205. With the news that Pereira is moving up to 205, I could see a world where eventually these two get matched up again. If Jacoby wins this one, maybe wins another one, Pereira probably only needs one fight before he's starting to get into the title picture, because the dude's electric, and they're gonna want to get him into the mix with the top guys very quickly. If he does in fact go to 205 and not rematch Izzy, which I see him fighting Izzy at least once more before their careers are over, but I'm getting sidetracked. Dustin Jacoby's the pick here. Mirzakhanov likes throwing overhand rights, kind of sloppy. You're not going to catch a guy as slick and experienced as Dustin with that shit. So Jacoby's the pick here. Probably, I think he gets a KO. Yeah, I think he gets a KO on Mirzakhanov. You can't be throwing that bullshit with a kickboxer like that. Next. And I don't mean to do like that vocal fry shit. I think that's just my voice. So I'm not one of those cringy TikTok kids who talks like this and does like that voice all the time. So just so you know. Billy Quarantillo versus Edson Barboza. I'm going Quarantillo. He is the favorite here, minus 180. 2-3 in his last 5. Barboza's an underdog here. He is 2-3 in his last 5 as well, coming off that loss to Bryce Mitchell, where he kind of got handled on the ground. I think Edson, obviously a legend of the game, probably maybe a future Hall of Famer. I don't know. It's tough to tell with the UFC. I feel like they kind of just make up the rules for the Hall of Fame whenever they want. He's definitely a Hall of Fame nominee, I'd say. We'll see if he ever gets put in, but obviously a legend of the game nonetheless. I don't think he needs the validation of the UFC to prove that. That all being said, Edson's gotten up there in age, 37. He's got a lot of miles on him, much more than Billy Quarantillo. Quarantillo's older guy himself, 34, but I think when you start getting in those upper 30s, the switch happens quick, and you age a lot faster once you start getting to that age. So Quarantillo, I think he's going to have the stamina edge over Barboza, and certainly the grappling edge, just based on Barboza getting completely dismantled by Bryce Mitchell. Not to say that Bryce Mitchell isn't a good grappler. He's a great grappler, but when it's that one-sided, I think that does just point out a flaw in your game. Barboza obviously has that explosive one-hit KO potential every time he steps in there. But I don't think that's as exaggerated as it once was, unfortunately. So I think he loses here, possibly in his last fight. I think that's entirely up to him. No one's rushing to have him hang it up, especially if he's not going out there and getting like viciously KO'd, put unconscious every time, which hasn't really been the case with Barboza. So I think Billy Q gets the dub here. But obviously much respect to Barboza, legend of the game. Moving on to another legend of the game who's still in the prime of his career, Max Holloway, coming up against Arnold Allen, an undefeated fighter in the UFC. This is just an explosive matchup. Really, let's be real, this is the number one contender fight. Yeah, Yair's got that like Mickey Mouse interim belt. I mean, Yair's certainly talented, but let's be honest, is he the best fighter in this division besides Volkanovski? No, not even close. That title belongs to Max Holloway, and I think he's going to prove it in this fight. I think Holloway's, even if he hasn't said it, I'm sure deep down he's thinking, like, that belt is such a joke for Yair to have. He's got that win over Yair that has aged really well now that Yair's the interim champ. So he has that leg up on him to begin with. And I think he feels a little bit disrespected that a guy he beat very recently has a belt around his waist and he doesn't. So Holloway obviously coming off of he is coming off of a loss to Volkanovski, the guy who he's lost to 3 times. But we all know what happens after he loses to Volkanovski. He completely runs through whatever opponent he faces. Previously, it was Yair, and then it was Kattar. It was Kattar, and then it was Yair. Ran through both of those guys who we know are very talented in this 145 division. So Max always brings it. I think he's only 29 he's 31 years old, which you wouldn't think he's still that young based on how long he's been in the UFC, how long he's been doing this. So I get people's concerns over that sort of longevity and all those miles he's gotten in the cage. But let's be real, has he shown any sign of slowing down at all? No. The dude is still the best 145-pound fighter, not named Volkanovski, not facing Volkanovski. So I think he beats Arnold Allen here. Arnold's a very interesting opponent. I wish we had gotten to see that full Calvin Kattar fight. I had actually picked Kattar in that fight to beat Arnold Allen, and I think you could fairly say Arnold Allen had a slight lead before Kattar, unfortunately, had that knee injury. But you never really know what's going to happen over 5 rounds. And it's fair to be concerned how Arnold is going to hold up in a 5-round fight against Max Holloway. Certainly, the longer the fight goes, has to benefit Holloway, given his 5-round experience. Very few people at all have more 5-round experience than Holloway. And Allen definitely is ridiculously powerful and a really good striker, and I think he deserves this opportunity, every bit of this opportunity. But it's a tall task taking on Max Holloway for any man alive. So Max Holloway is going to be the pick. I don't know if he gets a finish against Arnold Allen. I don't want to say Holloway's not a finisher, but I think he's more about output and just keep putting strikes on you and wearing you down. And if he doesn't get the finish, he at least knows that he's going to beat you on points. And I think that's a brilliant strategy. It's worked really well for him throughout his career. And yeah, Allen's he's still young. He's buff as shit. Got a big ass chin. I do not see him getting put out here. So I expect a very competitive 5-round fight. The speed I want the speed. I'll give that edge to Holloway in that department, and certainly like the crispness of striking is going to go to Holloway. I think he's more creative. I think he mixes it up better. But Allen is quick as shit. He's got that twitchy athleticism to him. So this should really be a phenomenal fight. I'm really looking forward to it. Max Holloway's the pick, and that is the fight breakdown. So like and subscribe. It's my first time. Those words have never come out of my mouth before. Never said one after another. Like and subscribe. There you go. First time here. You heard it first. Comment if I'm an idiot. Let me know. This video is coming out the day of the fights. Maybe you cue the video up, watch the breakdown, watch the fight. Give me snap reactions why I had a terrible pick. I don't know. Could be fun. I'll catch you guys later.